Let's look at some interlocking puzzle pieces from non-Christian writers. This is sometimes called extra-biblical writers or extra-biblical testimony. So these aren't people writing in the Bible. These are people like Josephus and Tacitus and Suetonius. These are writers who lived around that time who are giving us details about that era. And let's start in Matthew. Why avoid Herod Archelaus? Who is Archelaus? Archelaus is one of the sons of Herod the Great. When Herod the Great died in 6 BC, his kingdom was divided up, and one of his sons was Archelaus. And Archelaus got the section of the kingdom that included Jerusalem. And so he was the ruler from 4 BC to about 6 AD, so about 10 years. And as you read Matthew, he leaves a puzzle, because here's what Matthew records, that Joseph had a dream in Egypt to return to Israel with Mary and the child Jesus. But when Joseph heard that Archelaus was reigning in Judea in place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there. Having been warned in a dream, he withdrew to the district of Galilee, and he went and lived in a town called Nazareth. Now, Galilee is to the north in Israel, and of course Jerusalem is the area whereby Archelaus is in charge, or where Archelaus is in charge. There is no explanation as to who Archelaus is. There's no explanation as to why Joseph would want to avoid this area. So it seems to me the puzzle is this: why is Archelaus so scary? Somebody not in the Bible tells us. In fact, this man is the greatest Jewish historian of the time. His name is Titus Josephus. He lived from 37 AD to 100 AD. And he was one of the rebels against the Romans in 66 AD when the Jews tried to boot the Romans out. That did not end well, because what happened in 70 AD? The temple in the entire country basically was overrun by the Romans, and the temple has not been rebuilt to this day. So when Jesus says to them in Matthew chapter 24, that not one stone will be left upon another. And then they ask him, well, when are these things going to occur? And he says, before this generation passes away, these things are going to occur. He says, you will see the Son of Man coming in power on the clouds. And everyone's thinking that's a reference to the end of the world. No, it's not. It's a reference to 70 AD. He said that in 30 AD. What's a generation? 40 years. 40 years later, 70 AD, the Roman army descends upon Jerusalem, and they wipe out Jerusalem. They wipe out the temple. Josephus said there was nothing left. Now, what's all this business about coming in the clouds? What could you see? By the way, Jerusalem's elevated. What could you see from 100 miles if an army was coming on Jerusalem? A cloud of dust. In fact, in the Old Testament, in Isaiah 19, it says Yahweh rides a cloud of judgment against Egypt. The reference to the clouds is the army coming. Jesus is saying that Jerusalem would be judged because they rejected the Messiah within a generation. And there it was. This guy talks about it in a couple of works that he has done. One is called Antiquities. And here's what he says about Archelaus. Matthew doesn't explain, but the Jewish historian Josephus does, in putting out a disturbance at the temple in 4 BC, so he's just taken over. Archelaus sent in troops into the temple and slaughtered 3,000 Jews. Passover that year was canceled. He tries to assert his authority as soon as he takes over. He murders 3,000 Jews. They cancel Passover. A whole bunch of Jews are probably going back on the road toward Egypt. And Joseph and Mary and the baby Jesus are on their way back going, where are you guys going? Isn't it Passover? Archelaus, haven't you heard? He just slaughtered 3,000 of our brethren. Passover's been canceled. So what's Joseph doing? I'm not going to where that homicidal maniac is. I just left that area to escape a homicidal maniac, his father. I'm not going back there. I'm going to go to Galilee. Right? But you don't get that from the Bible. You get that from Josephus, and Josephus is writing about 40 years after this. So here comes an outside source, Josephus, and he says Matthew is reliable. Next one, number 2. Why did they take Jesus to the temple when he was 12? Why not 10? Why not 11?